afternoon, Howard Wiig, Code Green ThinkTech Hawaii. I have as my guest the distinguished Brandon Hayashi, Strategic Alliances Manager for OpTerra Energy. Before we get into the techie stuff, Brandon and I go way, way, way back, and he has had a fascinating shift in his life that I don't have the background story for, so he's going to give us the background story now. He and I are in the same technical field, and he used to do these technical presentations before fairly large groups, and my office mate and I are advanced Toastmasters. And when Brandon spoke, we would be sliding under the table because he would have his slides in back of him and he'd be saying, and the formula is X3 over AK, and when you do the division with that, and violating every good rule of speaking under the sun. And we'd say, Brandon, Toastmasters, come on. He'd say, yeah, I know, but I don't have time. And then we lost contact with one another. And the next thing I know, Brandon is on a TEDx talk. For those of you not familiar with TEDx, you certainly know the TED Talks, nationally famous, worldwide famous, some of the best speakers, the most influential speakers in the world get to do TED Talks. TEDx is the local version of that, but it's still very, very high quality. What in the world, Brandon, caused this metamorphosis on your part?
I think you're being overly generous, Howard. I don't know if I would say metamorphosis per se. I think, I'm not sure if they had anyone else better to speak, so they just kind of pulled my name out of a hat. But I think, in all seriousness, about making a little bit of a change in a positive direction to speak better, I think it really comes down to the fact that I started listening to people like yourselves and others saying, there are areas where you really need to improve upon. And I think rather than trying to just say, oh yeah, I'll get to it later, take a more proactive approach and be more open to actually taking criticism. And
it wasn't criticism, it was strong suggestions.
Point being that I needed to improve, no doubt. So I think that's where it started. And with my previous position, I was able to, and had to, by definition of my role, give a lot of presentations. So if I didn't improve, likely I wouldn't have had a job anymore. So it was something I had to do.
And so what happened?
Practice makes better, right? I'm not going to say perfect because there's still a lot more work to be done. But it was a lot of practice, a lot of listening, reading up, watching TED Talks, reading some books about how to speak like TED. So things like that definitely helped. And some good coaches along the way, some good mentors along the way. Absolutely.
So if there's hope for Brandon, by George, there's hope for all of us.
There's hope for anyone.
So, as Strategic Alliances Manager, I have to write that down.
It's a long title, yes.
For OpTerra. Well, first, why don't you tell us what Op/Terra is?
Sure. So OpTerra is actually a combination of both English and Latin or Italian. So op meaning to optimize, and terra meaning earth. So our approach really isn't just focusing only on energy per se, but looking at the greater, bigger picture of how we can affect the positive change that our clients, and really, in our case, our islands, but really our world needs. So we're looking at the fundamental function of energy and how that can make life better, but we're looking at other things in addition to that.
And you specialize in K-12 buildings and in university buildings and municipalities.
I would say those are our three big points. We are certainly, that's our bread and butter, where we've been, and I think going forward, I would add a fourth to that, which is our C&I, or the commercial and industrial sectors.
And you not only look at energy efficiency, but you look at the broader perspective. And you and I were chatting a bit, and it comes down to the fact that especially for kids don't learn only by having a well-lit classroom, an energy-efficient classroom, and just staring at the teacher and listening for minute after minute and hour after hour. When you go into a school, you do take a much broader approach to education.
Absolutely. I think every single one of the schools that we've done, and to be clear, the history of the company is essentially 40 years old. And when we look at the work that we're doing, specifically in Hawaii as well as across the United States on the mainland, we're looking at taking a comprehensive approach that takes into consideration the standards-aligned curriculum that need to be delivered, in our opinion. Without the curriculum tie-in, it is a good, maybe even an excellent energy program, but it's not the best that we can do for the school districts. And in order to do that, we need to make the true connections that exist between the work that's happening at the school and what happens by way of learning in the classroom. And in many cases, that means getting the child out of the classroom to see what is all happening in the bigger picture.
Can you give some examples of that?
Sure. So as you're probably aware, and maybe some of the listeners and watchers may be aware, OpTerra actually has a contract with the Hawaii Department of Education. So we're going to be doing work over the next 5 school years, touching essentially all 255 schools, looking at things with respect to renewables, energy efficiency, net zero energy campuses, and obviously importantly, the curriculum side of things. So one of the things we've already done, and we've done in many cases on the mainland as well too, is making sure that the curriculum that we're offering is actually appropriate for the classroom that we're doing the teaching. So it's not that a one size fits all, but really you're doing it in grade bands. So when we talk about grade bands, we're really looking at around K to 5 as one type of grade band, 6th to 8th grade, or middle school, and then 9th through 12th grade. And there are obviously differences between upper elementary and lower elementary. So it's really specific for what the teachers' needs are and obviously the students. Our role is to help educate the students, but really it is to empower the teachers. The train the trainer kind of approach, if you will, right, is to make sure that what we're providing the teachers is not just standards aligned, and in this case, obviously, we're talking about the Common Core state standards as well as next generation or science standards. We're looking at making sure that they have fun throughout the process as well too. So a lot of it, to your point earlier, is making sure they get out, that there's hands-on project-based learning opportunities. And in that, you're able to tie in without sometimes the students even knowing the science, the math, the engineering, the English language arts aspect, sometimes even social studies, right? So that's part of what we're doing in the classrooms here. We have some that have already been piloted here in Hawaii via the Kahe program. And what we've done there essentially is work with teachers and give them, we've worked with a lot of those in the upper elementary and middle school age group, and giving them curriculum that again ties into the Common Core state standard and drives them forward. As you may be aware, Hawaii's, when it comes to the science standard, is what they call the HCPS, the Hawaii Content and Performance Standards 3. So that's being moved to the next generation of the national movement of next generation science standards. So there's a lot of ways in which we're working with to be more progressive and provide where the DOE is moving. Again, if we don't provide what the DOE needs or wants, we're not delivering what we should be.
Yeah. So you start by going into a school and meeting with the principal first and explaining what you're all about, and then getting the principal's buy-in?
It does depend, right? And the reason why it depends is because across the country, different school districts are set up in different ways. So obviously when you have smaller school districts, you could perhaps go straight into the classroom, or rather the principal's office, but in other areas you have to actually go to the head, right? The district level, the superintendent, or the Department of Education in the respective area. So like many things, there's no one size fits all, and all depending upon what the customer's needs are and their protocol. We have to follow their protocol and approach. But ultimately, we do want to get down to the classroom teacher level, which means we do, in some cases, have to work our way down. In some cases, we can just go straight into the classroom.
And then when you get into the classroom, and we're all aware of the hierarchy that is DOE. So you've started with the superintendent, gone down through the district level, principal level. Now you're introducing yourself to a teacher in a classroom. What do you say? How do you work with them?
Right. By the time we get to the teacher level, obviously we would have already gotten buy-in by the principal. So that principal likely would have already prepped the teacher to know what to expect. But in addition to that, we, in many cases, don't go straight into the classroom teacher and say, okay, here it is. What we actually do conscientiously is provide professional development training. So we will talk to principals and have them decide, again, following their protocol, their desires, what fits into their overall schedule, and have them provide for us different teachers. Those teachers then get professionally developed in the training that we have, which is a part of our curriculum. They then take that and go back into their classroom and provide lessons to their students. And there's a feedback loop that happens. So we don't just train them, give them curriculum and say, good luck. We make sure that we stay in contact with them. They actually have to do some training with us. So they actually give role-playing, if you will. So we're the students and the teacher's the teacher, and they would actually perform and have us be the students so that they can be critiqued and see how it works. And also, importantly, share, look, I did this, and this is what worked well, and this didn't. Do you have pointers? You know, and then there's a lot of peer feedback as well, too. Because a lot of this, like so many other things in our islands with the Coconut Wireless, is that if you have teachers in one school, or even teachers in another district that are doing it, but somehow they know each other, related to one another, and they kind of talk stories, say, hey, I got this really good program going on. You might want to be a part of it. This is how it all grows. Our educational program, the curriculum is a voluntary program, so no one is required to do it, which is why we have to align it to the actual standards so that it's not another thing put on the plates of the teachers. There's so much they got going on.
Has to fit in there.
Exactly. They have to teach the certain standards. They have to, you know, their evaluation system, obviously, that they have to deal with. There's a whole bunch of things going on. My mom is actually a retired teacher, 35 plus years in the DOE, so believe me, she's giving me an earful about you can't just keep putting more and more things on the teachers, right? You got to be mindful of their constraints and their limitations. And the whole point is they're there to teach, educate, and care for the students. Right?
So now we've got a thoroughly trained teacher. She's about to start this session in the classroom with the kids, be they little kids or medium-sized kids. What types of things, what type of physical things will she be doing with the kids?
Right, okay, so let's take, for example, an upper elementary school kid, say maybe 5th grade or so, or maybe even 6th grade. So there are some kits that go along with this. So again, it's not just lesson plans per se, but it's things for kids to get their hands dirty, literally. So there are, for example, we partner with Island Energy Inquiries, which is a part of the Maui Economic Development Board. They've done a wonderful job, IEI has done a wonderful job over the last decade or so, really creating energy-specific programs for Hawaii. It's Hawaii-based. And so we partner with them, and together the professional development training has them literally walk away with some kits and a lending library at their school. Some of the things, for example, you'll find in the kit will be the opportunity for the kids to create their own solar thermal system, right?
So solar thermal meaning solar water heating.
Right, it's a combination between solar thermal and using a pump that is solar powered.
Okay.
So it's to kind of get them to understand, right, the properties of the sun. Again, when you're at the lower grades, what you're looking at is more the earth scientist side. How, for example, do we use or do we need on Earth the thermal properties of the sun? Likewise, also, how do we need and use the light properties of the sun? And that goes directly into, for example, how you would use heat and light to power something. And so you would have small solar panels or solar modules attached to a motor, and that motor would be able to pump some of the water that will go through the tube. That tube is obviously clear, and you have to do all of this outside, obviously. And then you're able to actually measure the temperature of the water and so forth. So
they have little thermometers or something?
There's some really interesting things there. And then there's other things having to do strictly with photovoltaics, with PV modules themselves. So smaller ones they can actually build. And again, for the higher side, the higher end, older kids, they would actually be given a wire diagram as an example, and actually have to wire and put together a small PV system. And again, if you cross your wires, you're not going to get flow of electrons. So then there's ways to double check to see what actually works, why doesn't it work. Again, problem solving. And when they get all that information, they have to take measurements and so forth. So you're hitting some of the data analytics standards that DOE has to do, a number of different ways to really draw it all together and have fun. And you could, for example, make the case, okay, so you have your system that's built, you're measuring the flow of electrons, which can be equated to a certain dollar value. And then how much would that offset of the school's consumption? How could you make the business case to your principal to install PV, for example? So you're bringing in some of the business, you're bringing in the presentation skills, you're bringing in the English language arts.
And numbers, you're bringing in numbers
absolutely,
too.
math and science, right? So you can see how even in just one small program, all depending on how the teacher or teachers bundle up what's being taught, it can hit so many different avenues. And the kids don't even know it. To them, it's an opportunity to learn and have fun.
And get outside, and
Who doesn't mind getting out of the classroom, right, every once in a while?
And the end product, the other stuff you're doing, is reducing the school's electricity bills. Well,
absolutely,
that's
absolutely.
so cheerful that calls for a brief break. Brandon Hayashi, back in a minute.
Hi, I'm Jay Fidel. I'm host of Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy. which is our flagship show, which plays 4 to 5 p.m. every Wednesday. And the supporters of that show are Hawaii Energy Policy Forum and Hawaii Energy. And luckily enough, we have representatives of both of them right here today to tell you more about what they think about the show. Sharon Moriwaki at my left is co-chair of Hawaii Energy Policy Forum, and she goes first. Sharon?
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. I'm so glad that we have this Hawaii, the state of clean energy. This was 2 years ago when we started this, and we have continued it because it's so important, and there's so many developments happening across the state. And we hope you'll tune in every Wednesday, 4 to 5. It's wonderful.
And Ray is Hawaii Energy. Ray, what is your thought about the same subject?
Well, I agree completely with Sharon that we are talking about every Wednesday, 4 to 5. We talk about some of the most important subjects that are affecting the islands now and into the future. Energy, clean energy, we need it. We often run into new ideas that we had not thought about before. We did just today, and I think we're going to have more of that in the future. So come on down and watch us 4 to 5 on Wednesdays, and we'll see what happens.
We'll see you then. Aloha.
Aloha.
Good afternoon again. Howard Wiig, Code Green, ThinkTech Hawaii. My esteemed guest today is Brandon Hayashi, Strategic Alliances Manager for OpTerra Inc. We just had a fascinating conversation on OpTerra getting into the classrooms and not only rendering the schools more energy efficient and putting renewables on the schools, but getting the kids personally involved in incorporating this into their science curriculum, even engineering type curriculum, and we throw in math, presentation skills, a whole schmear. But let's deviate for a minute into one of my favorite topics and yours, because I sit on the Human-Centric Lighting Committee. And for those of you not familiar with that, we are in the world now, the lighting world of LEDs. For instance, the lights that illuminate us right now used to be these very hot incandescent lights. Incandescent, incidentally, comes from the Latin incandescere, which means white hot. We have these LEDs here. We're not feeling a drop of warmth. Now, LEDs not only are super, super efficient, but you can tune them, you do anything you want with them. You can change their colors, you can dim them, they don't care how often they go on and off. The potential is virtually endless for LEDs, and you're hearing it from me first, if you haven't heard it already. So, something called human-centric lighting, you're taking these vast capabilities of LEDs and asking, how can we improve human performance, sleep patterns, even human health? Plus, the more we play with these LEDs, the more energy we save. It's not atypical now to remove an old-fashioned, even fluorescent lighting system, install an LED system, and I've heard of this, reducing energy use by 90% while improving the quality of the light. So with all of that background, Brandon, why don't you give us your take on what human-centric lighting is all about?
Right, so part of the TEDx talk that I gave earlier this year was absolutely on human-centric lighting, and really the human-centric aspect of it, or the human aspect of it, is really the impact that it has upon our circadian rhythms, or the way in which truly our brain interprets the light and then changes the way, for example, certain things happen within our 24-hour dark light cycle internal to us.
Which is circadian rhythm.
Right.
Yeah, we all have an up and a down cycle. We know that from the fact that a lot of us, right after lunch, just wish we had a place to take a nap. And around 9:30, 10:30 at night, we begin to go down, 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 down. Ideally, we do that.
Ideally, right,
Yeah,
if we were healthy
yeah.
adults. And that's part of the challenge with our world today, because we do live in a 24/7 society. and that in many ways entails light in our once former darkness night. And that light that impedes our night is really part of the problem, because what's happening is, as you said earlier, when we didn't have so much light at night, we essentially were, your average healthy human has, I believe there was a Harvard study that came out that said the variation between humans' circadian rhythms as far as a 24-hour cycle is 24 hours plus or minus 12 or 16 minutes. So we're all pretty close to one another with respect to our circadian rhythm. But what's happened is that when you have light, particularly white light, on the higher Kelvin spectrum, right? So you're talking obviously essentially above 3,500 Kelvin even, or 3,500 or more. Certainly when you get to your Kmarts or your Walmarts or Safeways at night, you're getting probably more like 4,100, in some cases maybe even 6,500 Kelvin, right? So really
how
white
about the light that's going down on car lots at night?
Right.
That's probably 5,000, 5,500.
Right, right. I mean, you see a lot of, for example, even what was done on H1 with the retrofit of those LEDs, which is great in many regards from an efficiency standpoint. But that night that is no longer really dark anymore, that's part of the problem, because what it does is, if I can explain a little bit of how it works, essentially what happens is you have light that enters into your retina, and that retina interprets the light and sends signals to your suprachiasmatic nuclei, or your SCN. That SCN is essentially your 24-hour clock, controls a lot of your bodily functions. What that'll do is then send a message. For example, the what's called the IPRGCs, or the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, which were rediscovered around 1998, 2000. And these are ancient cells in our eyes, in our retina, that basically tell us whether it's light or it's dark. And because it's a relatively ancient cell, you don't need a whole lot of input, right? If you have light that's coming from you that would be perhaps similar to that which was normally in the hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands, if not million plus years of which we've evolved as a Homo sapien, or prior to us, Homo erectus, Homo habilis, and so forth. We are attuned, like any other creature, to our environment. We're meant to be optimized, doing physical work, thinking, and so forth during the peak light hours. And so then our brain now in our society is changed in the sense that you have light coming in at nighttime that is replicating the Kelvin that you would once see during the daytime. And so now your brain is shifting and no longer going into your sleep preparation mode, which is when melatonin would be released and secreted from your pineal gland, and that's actually being postponed. And with that postponement comes a slew of other problems. And we can get into that a little bit later. But the whole point being is that that light in our night is what changes the way in which we normally have our 24-hour cycles. And that fundamentally is part of the problem.
Yeah, part of one of these, or many, many studies have gone into night shift workers.
Yes.
And they develop all kinds of ailments, all the way to cancer, because their circadian rhythm, their normal circadian rhythm, that, as you said, we developed over hundreds of thousands of years, has been very seriously disrupted.
Yeah. And I think we've kind of talked a little bit about this before, but really, if you look at the last 5 generations, if not maybe even only 4 generations, the light that impedes our night has dramatically changed to the point where we no longer resemble our societal norms, our sleeping and wake patterns don't even resemble people from 150 years ago. And that's for people who live in this area where we really don't have a whole lot of seasonal shifts. You look at people who are farther away from the equator, you would have times, and again, not the ancient past, but even 100, 150 years ago, during the wintertime, sometimes sleep upwards of 9 hours a day, 10 hours a day. Now, if I remember the statistics correctly, I believe the average American gets somewhere in the neighborhood of about 5 to 6 hours of sleep a night, which hugely impacts your performance the next day.
Yeah, you and I can probably relate to that, because there's often times when I get to bed later than I should, I wake up earlier than I should. And especially by the next afternoon, I'm staring at my computer screen.
And so what happens with that, Howard, right? Then you infuse yourself with a caffeine injection called coffee, right? Or tea. And so then what happens is you get this cycle that perpetuates itself, which is why folks like Dr. Stephen Lockley at Harvard, who's done a lot of research on the neuroscience behind after they found the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cell, essentially say that we're in perpetual sleep deprivation or perpetual jet lag. right? And unfortunately, it is not a far stretch from the truth. Just anecdotally, we know this to be
Yeah,
true.
and you and I are both very busy people, and I think we can relate from a personal standpoint.
Yeah.
At least I certainly can.
Mhm. And unfortunately, I think it's becoming more and more of a problem, not even just nationwide, but across the globe, from developed and developing countries.
So that's the theory. Now let's get into human-centric lighting and the capabilities of LEDs as to how to
Right, so-
favorably affect us.
Exactly. So if we look at the problem, if you want to call it a problem, because every problem has an opportunity built within it, is that we're getting the wrong type of light during the wrong time of day. So if we can change it so that you have the right type of light during the right time of day, we can perhaps fix a lot of these ills. And so what human-centric lighting allows you to do is essentially be able to change the color temperature of the light. So going back to where we came from originally and how we evolved with our environment, there's certain types of light that we're used to seeing. For example, you could make the argument that at sunrise and sunset, our eyes got used to, and therefore our bodies got accustomed to seeing a certain type of light, let's call it 2700 Kelvin, that signaled certain things biologically, emotionally, and otherwise. And so if you can start to mimic the natural pattern of the sun, the natural types of light one would get from the day, that goes from 2700 Kelvin to, you know, I believe the blue sky is somewhere around 15,000 Kelvin, somewhere in that neighborhood. We don't have lights that necessarily go to that level, but, you know, I think it's, in the market, you're going to see around 6,500 Kelvin pretty easily. Let's just say we go 2,700 to 6,500 to 2,700 Kelvin. And so with that pattern, you then start to mimic what it is that you see during the day. So your body starts to get more accustomed to what it normally would be doing, as opposed to what we've tried to change over the past 4 or 5 generations.
Well, now you say, well, let's back up a little bit for those of the audience who are not totally immersed in light. Degrees Kelvin is measured from the lower it is, the warmer the light is, the cooler it is, the higher the degrees Kelvin is. And an example of low degrees Kelvin might be the street lights that we have out now. The orangish ones are about 2,200 degrees Kelvin. And then we are now having LED street lights on the freeways and in certain neighborhoods, and they are probably, they're a good solid 4,000 degrees Kelvin. And if you look at them, they look bluish or really, really bright. And that's what degrees Kelvin is all about. But in the early dawn and in the late sunset period, we actually get reds there. So it's not just 2,700, it's way, way, way down there. And there's this kind of bell curve of the degrees Kelvin going almost from zero back to zero again.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, again, what we evolved with. And think of a lot of our ancestors. A lot of us have ancestors who worked on the plantations. Wasn't a whole lot of light in the plantation towns. So you would get up really, really early. You'd be in the out in the cane fields or whatever by very early morning, then knock off and do your photo or whatever in the afternoon, have an early dinner, and by George, you'd be back in bed at just when it got dark. We were even that recently following a natural circadian rhythm.
Right,
Yeah.
electric light really changed everything.
Yeah.
And even if you had light at nighttime, it was in the form of a lower Kelvin, right? You had fire with the oranges, the yellows, the reds, or even gas-fired lights, right? So things dramatically have changed, and that is what we're talking about with human-centric lighting, is to get it back closer to where we used to be as far as the color temperature changing over time.
Yeah, a little more background there. The lower the degrees Kelvin, the higher our melatonin level. Melatonin is the sleep hormone. And when there's a bright sun out there, our melatonin is virtually zero. When there's bright bluish lights out there, melatonin is zero. The closer we get to the reds, like reddish sunset, the greater the melatonin level, the sleepier we get. And that's again, how we and other creatures evolved over hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years.
Exactly.
So to get back to the capability of LEDs, we keep on getting to the theory here. So
Or the science behind it.
The science behind it, yeah. So what can LEDs help us, how can LEDs help us to get back into that rhythm?
So the science, really, there's been studies that have shown, and this is not just for schools, for elementary or high school age kids, but really they're looking at the healthcare industry and also the elder care industry as well too, because your circadian rhythms change over time. There's a big shift that happens during the adolescence, which is why teenagers have a horrible reputation, for example, of being lazy, waking up late, staying up late, and so forth. But that's all part of the way in which our circadian rhythms are changing. And also when we get older, they start to change as well too. You know, there's stereotypes, oh, you reach a certain age, you're having dinner at 4 p.m., right?
Yeah, the early bird special.
Right. Yeah. So knowing that though that is a natural flow of life, right? There's going to be certain solutions that fit better types of facilities, or they'll be tuned into a certain way depending upon the type of clientele, if you will, that you have. So schools, obviously, you're only there for a certain period of the time, while if you're at a hospital or an elderly care center, you could potentially be there in every minute of the 24-hour cycle.
You just don't get outdoors when
Right,
you're in an elderly.
right.
Yeah.
And that's where the greatest impact really can be had, because then you're able to really mimic what light is meant to be and how we've evolved in that environment.
Okay, we need to take a break, but let's tune right back into this when we resume.
Sure.
And speculate on how, say, an elderly person in a home might have the natural rhythm emulated with LED lights, and therefore have them on a natural cycle. Yeah, we need to take a break. Back in a minute. ThinkTech Hawaii, Brandon Hayashi.
Aloha, my name is Miley Scarpino, and I'm the host of the Empower Hour. If you're interested in health, nutrition, fitness, here on the island of Oahu, want to learn more about places to train at or different trainers available, then watch my show on Fridays at 3. We have a great time, and I hope that you'll come join us. Much aloha. Now go get swole.
Hi, I'm your host on ThinkTech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, ThinkTech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia. And by Asia, we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world, and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Top and so forth.
ThinkTech Hawaii, Howard Wiig, Code Green, Brandon Hayashi, Strategic Alliances Manager for OpTerra Energy. We have so much to talk about, and we've only got 15 minutes to do it in. Let's wrap up the human-centric lighting portion by describing what LEDs might do for an elderly person in a home where he or she has very little access to daylight, but you want to maintain that natural rhythm. So how might LEDs perform to help this elderly person?
Right, so the human-centric lighting LEDs would be able to essentially mimic what the light patterns would be throughout the day. So you'd be starting off, like we had mentioned in the previous section, really talk about having it be at a lower Kelvin, then come up as the day comes.
So
and go
lower
down.
Kelvin being
Warmer,
almost reddish and
yellow
then warmer.
reddish, coming up to a bluer white light type, and then coming back down again for the sunset side. And really being able to make it so that their biorhythms or their circadian rhythms can get back in tune with things. And I haven't delved a whole lot into that side because I've always been focusing on the educational side of things, but some of the things I have read seem very positive, and I know there are certain companies out there that are already starting to implement that in people's homes. So you'll have that on the residential front, and you can see they have, I believe the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal actually ran a piece earlier this year that showed that shift in one person's home, and you can see the coloration and how it changed over a period of time. And some people, I think, would have the tendency to say, oh, that's nice, but what does it actually do? And I think that's one of the things that we can talk about. The science behind it is really what's driving the technology. It's not the industry trying to find another way to sell you an LED. It is really driven by the science aspect of things.
And making us healthier, more productive.
Right.
And helping us to get some adequate sleep.
Right.
Instead of staring at a blue television set, you might be surrounded by reddish light at 10 o'clock at night, and that's a reminder, am I getting sleepy?
Right,
Yeah,
right. And there are a lot of things, Howard, right, that there is no silver bullet, right? You would have to do this in collaboration with a whole lot of other things. You would want that facility to have a activities program where those adults, those elderly adults, are doing physical activity, not being set in front of a television all day looking at things. I mean, it's all in collaboration with it, but this is an important part of it that would be a part of a greater, larger program.
Okay, let's jump to another one of my favorite topics, which is dark skies. As everybody's aware, on top of Mauna Kea, we have the world's best astronomy facilities. We're world famous, and with certain circumstances permitting, we will have a 30-meter telescope up there. 30 meters is about a football field. The results of that research coming from that telescope are going to be just incredible, mind-blowing. But what the astronomers need up there are dark skies. We've been talking about reds and blues. Astronomers hate blue light. So what I and other people are working on is delivering outdoor lighting that is way over on the reddish side. And we can do that with LEDs, but there's a conflict between what the astronomers want and what the conventional street lighting guys want. They say, oh, the bluer it is, the better the visual acuity, the less wattage we need, energy efficiency, so forth, so forth. So the Big Island has gone to the forefront in this. They have conventional LED lights, but they put a lens over each of the street lights which filters out all but 2% of the blues, and the astronomers are happy as clams, and there's good visual acuity, good sight down on the pavement to keep things safe for drivers and pedestrians. And Brandon, you just happen to have a pair of glasses that behave very similarly to that. You want to?
Just by happenstance.
Yeah, you want to tell us what this is all
Sure.
about? Yeah.
So this actually is a very apt description. It essentially is a lens that you'd be putting over your eyes, right? So basically, these glasses, their main function is to mitigate out blue light. And they're, for those who can see, it's essentially, PPE, it's safety goggles. And the reason why you want to have that is going back to our intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, being that they are a very ancient cell, you could have light that comes in peripherally, above, below, not just coming directly into your eyes. So this helps mitigate all of that light that would be coming in bidirectional or multi-directional. Because even if you're looking at a TV, if you have a lamp on over here, that light is what's being impacted by the IPRGC. Or really, that light impacts the IPRGC. So this basically would act as a shield, right? There are still ways of which light could get in. Nothing is ever perfect, and this is a good way to start. There are tons of other things on the market right now. You can get them at Amazon and a number of other places as well, where you could have filters, literally a physical filter that would go over your whatever the screen is, whether it's your smartphone, your tablet, laptop, right? You can have built-in filters that essentially turn at the time of sunrise and sunset. So I have it, for example, on my laptop. I have one on my smartphone that basically you have it timed, and it would change the actual Kelvin of the screen, if you will. And you can see at nighttime when I'm doing work, it's literally a red filter over it. And if you turn it to certain ways, you can barely even see anything because the filter is that strong. And the whole purpose of that is essentially you're having a filter over your screen, you have a filter over your eyes by way of the glasses. And if you don't have too much other white light or blue light, you're actually able to still do work and kind of trick your eyes into seeing fire, not this blue light. So hopefully, and scientifically, apparently it's been proven that this actually does mitigate the blue light, which means your brain is now making it so that you're getting back on your melatonin production schedule, which is normally, again, a healthy adult, around 9 or 10 p.m. So you're going to feel yourself getting tired, which is not good for actually doing work late at night. You're not as productive.
You're not supposed to be.
But you're not supposed
work.
to be. You're supposed to be sleeping. So this is actually a good thing.
So I'm just imagining you've got these hyperactive 4, 5, 6-year-old kids running all over the place. Okay, Johnny. Okay, Susan, time to put on your glasses. Oh, I'm so sleepy.
It's not magic. I wish it were, because I have a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, and they are crazy. But they also, at their age, need a lot more sleep. So they will naturally be going to bed a lot earlier. This is really for the adults in us, particularly those who find their wind down time after work by watching television. If you could at least put this on, that'll help things.
Yeah, maybe I should get a pair of those because I'm inclined to stay up after 11 and I have to continually pound on myself. Howard, it's 10. Get ready for bed, gosh darn it.
Yeah.
Because you're getting up at 5.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And I don't want to be pumping any kind of brands because there's a ton
Yeah.
of stuff out there. But if you go to Amazon, you can find them for about $7 or $8.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. So they're not expensive. They're not even high tech, but they are effective.
Yeah. And again, the astronomers on the Big Island love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've just got a few minutes here. Get back to OpTerra's core function, which is to get into educational facilities, be it K to 12, universities, whatever. This is the second of your newsletters. You want to tell us what the newsletter is all about and give some examples of the type of thing you're doing in schools. Yeah.
Sure. One of our company's policies really is about not talking about it too much until it's actually built. Right? I think it's a good policy to have. But the newsletter is just a way for us to communicate to all the stakeholders. And as the fact that we are the only state that has a state-funded Department of Education, and the fact that we have 175 plus students in our public school system, almost everyone is
175?
over 175,000.
1,000. You
Yeah.
didn't put the 1,000
Sorry.
in there. Yeah.
Yeah, depending on, again, not getting
Yeah.
too technical, but if you include the charter schools, then it's more like 180 something thousand.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a lot of students. It's a major chunk of our total population.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And we can have a whole discussion and then some about the importance of education. But that said, the newsletter is basically just a way to let people know about what's going on, what our goals are, how we're achieving against them, and then really letting people know about what the content of the work is that we're doing. Because again, it's not just a PV program, it's much more
Yeah,
comprehensive
much
than that.
more. Can you give some examples of, say, what's in this newsletter or other things that come to mind that you're actually doing in schools?
Well, there are a number of things that we're doing right now on the education front. Again, we've had a pilot program for the curricula for just about more than half of the school year, last school year. We're doing PV work as we speak. We've done a number of audits, both lighting as well as greater, like ASHRAE level 1 type of audits. So there's a lot of work going in that space.
And just for the audience, when you do an audit, there's a engineer or a technician who goes into the school and looks at the lights, counts the lights, and asks himself, are these efficient lights, inefficient lights, and even the proper degrees Kelvin, and then might look in the electrical box, what's going on here, look at the water heating system, if there's hot water there and so forth.
Right.
Document everything, all the energy using components, and then ask himself, how can we deliver better light, better whatever, at a much lower energy cost?
Exactly. I think what's really important, and I think our company is focusing on, is really that you have to do the energy efficiency, renewable energy aspect of things. You have to tie in the education. But if all you do is have greater efficiency, you're not really delivering effectiveness for the student.
Because these kids today, they have to be much more environmentally aware than our generation is, because we have done a great job of messing up this planet. And if the kids don't get it and change things really dramatically, we are in the proverbial deep kimchi.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would agree to that. And we can't wait really for my kids' generation to grow up, and we ourselves have obviously need to take steps now.
Yeah, this is great stuff and gives us hope for the future. 180-something thousand public school kids will be not just energy efficiency aware, but renewables aware. And then you can extend this to the contribution you're making to the planet, to Mother Earth.
Absolutely. And when we talk about islands are the first to be impacted by climate change, this is an imperative.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, education itself of future generations is a social obligation, I would argue. But as far as preparing ourselves for the future, we have no choice. We have to move towards mitigation and adaptation.
And on that cheery note, we need to close. We just barely begun the discussion. Let's get you back, Brandon, before too awfully long.
All right, that'd be good fun.
Resume. ThinkTech Hawaii Code Green, Brandon Hayashi, Strategic Alliances Manager for OpTerra Energy. See you next time.